I genuinely thought this day would never come, but the cartoon I've been working on since the start of 2020 is finally released. And right off the bat, I just want to say the response has completely blown any expectation I could have had out of the water. No joke, my goal for the show was getting a positive like to dislike ratio, and so it's safe to say I achieved my goal. So much so that before we get into the behind the scenes and questions you guys have about the cartoon, I wanted to make a, perhaps very expected, special announcement. On September 8th, 2024, I uploaded the pilot for my cartoon Catching Up. In under a week, the animation has gotten over 1 million views and over 100,000 likes, with me getting dozens of comments and messages every day about where episode 2 is. I funded the entirety of the pilot myself and worked on it with an extremely talented crew for around 3 years, to show people what I wanted to do with the series in the hopes that the response would be positive enough to crowdfund an additional episode. It's safe to say at this point that the response to the pilot has blown all my expectations out of the water, and so I'm ready to jump right into creating a second episode as soon as possible, with many members of the original team eager to continue working on more Catching Up. This includes hiring my friend Rebecca to be an animation director, to make sure production is as efficient as possible. She's had experience working on a ton of cartoons for Netflix and Disney, and is ready to get on Catching Up as soon as her current contract ends. Of course, I'd love to make an entire season of Catching Up, and so I've included further stretch goals to open up the possibility of creating more than a single episode, with the final stretch goal ultimately totaling to a season of 6 cartoons. I'm offering a ton of rewards for the people who decide to back the project, including keychains, acrylic standees, producer credits, a Blu-ray of whatever episodes we get to make, and even the chance to have a watch party over Discord with the voices of Rob and Clay. You can also get access to a fully drawn and voiced animatic that I never made. Consider it a lost episode of sorts. There's way more rewards on offer, so be sure to check them out. Over the course of working on the pilot, I had the time to experiment with exactly what I wanted for the series, and I'm confident in the direction that I want to take it. Exploring themes of maturing, fitting in, and the social pressure put on teenagers to start acting older even when they aren't ready. I've already started work on planning out a second episode, and I'm ready to begin production on it as soon as the campaign finishes, with rewards planned to be sent out throughout 2025. I hope you consider backing Catching Up and look forward to what we make in the future. Thanks. Whether we get to make one more episode, 2, 3, hell, if it even flops completely and Catching Up ends here, I cannot stress how amazed I am at what the team I worked with was able to accomplish, and could not be more happy with how it came out. It ain't perfect, and there are definitely issues with it that I want to address as we go on, but I just wanted to say that overall, this has been an incredibly fun, inciting, and only mostly stressful experience that has given me much greater appreciation for the work that goes into making a full cartoon. Want to hear something insane? When I started working on Catching Up, this was my most recent video at the time, and this is how it sounded.
But at the end of the day, Clarence is a comedy, and its main goal is to make you laugh, so how well does it accomplish this? Well, in my opinion, greatly.
I genuinely don't think I could talk in a video like that again, even if I tried. And so today I find it fitting to sit down and finally talk about the cartoon. Considering how vaguely I've talked about it over the years, I think it's worth discussing how it came to be. Troubles I ran into during production, building a crew, scrapping everything, and starting over, we'll get to it, and then finally releasing it. Also, where I want to take the project going forward. Originally, this video was going to come out before the cartoon, just to kind of give folks an idea of what I was doing before they watched it, but after a while I came to the conclusion that I should just let the thing speak for itself. And thankfully, I think that actually helped in a lot of ways. Allowed people to just go in blind and see what the fuck I've been talking about for the past few years. So, anyways, without further ado, let's talk about Catching Up. The good, the bad, and the ugly, I guess. But before we get into that, I want to take a second to talk about today's sponsor, Vogris. This video is sponsored by Vogris. You cannot comprehend how excited I was to have Vogris reach out to me, guys. Mainly because I've actually used their service. Vogris is a leading art manufacturer known for their personalized customization and high-quality products. Their website is super easy to use, take it from me. I tabled at a convention not too long ago and used them to create my own acrylic keychains and standees, but they also do posters, pins, and way more. With an order minimum of only 3 pieces for multiple designs, VIP deals like 8% off for no limit use and a 26% discount in monthly activity, and more on top of that, as well as 60 days of worry-free shipping, there's nowhere better to go than Vogris for custom products. I feel like they speak for themselves, they came out fantastic. So be sure to use my link in the description to check out Vogris today, and thanks Vogris for sponsoring this video. Stuff like that probably contributed to about 3/4 of the cartoon's budget. I think it was around the end of 2019 when Hazbin Hotel came out, and, no matter what you think of it, there's no denying that it completely changed what people thought was possible for independent animation. Funnily enough, while the whole indie animation term has boomed in the past couple of years, I don't think it even really existed at all when I started catching up. I'm sure a lot of people out there had a similar experience after watching Hazbin, wait a second, this is possible? You can just do this? That inspired my 17-year-old self into pursuing an idea for a cartoon I had. If you've seen this channel for even a second, you'd know that I have quite an affection for simple little slice-of-life cartoons focusing on a couple of characters just dealing with a situation and coming out the other side better for it. And so from the get-go, I knew that's what I wanted to focus on. Not the most insanely original idea I'm aware of, but at the time I didn't really care. I just wanted to tell simple stories with a couple characters facing some kind of social situation and feeling completely, yet coming out the other end with a positive outlook. That's why I eventually chose the name Catching Up very early into working on it. I was pretty happy to see people understand the meaning behind it, but I have seen a couple people confused, since obviously the cartoon is not about two friends catching up, really, in the traditional sense. But to me it was more so in reference to the fact that it stars two guys who feel very out of place compared to the world around them, one being very antisocial and keeping to himself, with the other being very outward and actively wanting to socialize, but not realizing how his eccentric personality isn't considered all that cool at his age, being a little naive as to how the world perceives them. They're not catching up with each other, they're catching up to the kind of life you're expected to have as a teenager. Going to cool clubs, drinking, chatting up girls, all that jazz. It was literally a couple months before COVID when I truly started considering what I wanted to do with it. At first, I only really had the design of Rob, which looked like this. I'd actually been trying to draw this character for a long time before. Originally, I had an idea for a show about a mascot from a platform video game going into different game genres in every episode on his way to find, I don't know, something. I didn't get that far into it. Glitch Text came out soon after, and I realized that was a very similar idea, so fuck me. Because of that idea of him being from a Mario Sonic sort of background, I just figured I would give him a friend that was basically his player too, like a little gray mouse or something with similar features. But once the concept shifted more to being about social situations with a more grounded setting, I decided I would obviously have to put more work into designing and figuring out who his friend would be. I have to apologize for how awful the sketches you're about to see are. I genuinely did not think I would get this far, and someday I would have to show them off, but originally Clay was going to be a dog or a wolf or something with a long snout. He was going to work a part-time job at a crappy convenience store in Rob's town, and Rob would recognize him from school and go bother him at work all the time. I still like that idea, actually. I'll probably keep it for a final show. But that's why I gave him the cap and the jacket. It was supposed to be like his work uniform, but I just liked it enough to keep it that way. Also, made him a cat instead of a dog because, I don't know, it felt the most obvious. Cat and mouse, no shit. Funnily enough, I did not think about the Tom and Jerry connection until years later after I started sharing more, got a comment about it, and went, oh yeah. Sorry if this isn't interesting, by the way. I will go into how it actually was making the episode, but there was about 2 out of the 4 years working on this where it was all just figuring this shit out. But with that, I got to work on a pilot script. It was actually fully completed and I started storyboarding it. Sadly, do not have them anymore. I think I was so ashamed that I didn't bother archiving them when moving to a new computer. It was basically just an introductory episode about Rob moving to a new school, and on his first day he runs into Clay and bricks his school project. Clay was a little more tough in this version, more scraggly, and so they started fighting, and it ends up with both of them going to detention and Rob trying to make it up to him by fixing his project as they end it by walking away as friends. It sucked, it was nothing, which is shit because it meant I never got to use this teacher design, which I liked a lot. I also just wanted to get away from the school setting. I don't think it's terribly interesting to have episodes about, the big science fair or electing the school president. Mostly because I didn't fucking do any of that in my school. In Ireland, you just sort of went to school, talked with your friends for 8 hours, then went home. There wasn't much effort to lean into school spirit or fun activities or anything. And so then and there I decided that if I were to make a cartoon about 2 characters who were going to school, then I would want to do everything in my power to show them actually going to school for as little time as possible. From there, I rewrote the script entirely and made it a completely different idea. I wanted to lean much more into the comedic angle, where the plot is nothing more than a setup for gags. And so I wrote a new episode about Rob having this crippling fear of spiders and deciding he never wanted to sleep after hearing that dumb rumor that spiders crawl in your mouth at nighttime, and so it's up to Clay to try and help him get over it. I actually liked this script. The nothing plot allowed me to solely focus on dumb gags and pretty much do whatever I wanted. But shortly after finishing, I realized that the idea overall just didn't work that well as a first episode, It doesn't really introduce you to the world or the characters, and so once again I decided to go back to the drawing board and start over. It was also around this time when I decided to redesign both characters. Nothing major, mostly just simplifying them. I sort of had a rule where if there were a detail I just hated to draw, then I would just get rid of it. The main things there being Rob's tufts of hair, which I think ruined his silhouette. Clay's cattail got the boot as well because I just always forgot to draw it. New lore was God lifted Clay from the ground and cut off his tail. Now it's a scraggly little nub that's always obscured by his jacket at all times. Problem solving. I also changed Rob's colors from this ugly dark brown to a nice lighter brown with a hint of purple mixed in. My friend Allison did this art of him once where she colored him this way, and so I drew him like that and ended up liking it way more. So I stole it. Thanks, Allison. It was around this time I also started looking for voice actors and storyboard artists via Twitter, in which I find both Rob and Clay's voices in Darcy McGuire and Michael Kovac. Funnily enough, both of which would go on to voice characters in Murder Drones. Another interesting thing that happened as a result of how long it took me to work on this was Michael Kovac subsequently getting cast in, well, everything. It's now a bit of a meme that he's cast in like every indie project ever, which I think is only a testament to how talented of a voice actor he is, but at the time of me casting him as Clay, I think the biggest thing I had heard him in was the Has-Been pilot. Anyways, from there I wrote what I would want to be the pilot, focusing more on a social situation. In this case it was Rob telling Clay they're gonna go to a house party of this girl, I called her Jessica at the time, was the first thing that came to mind. Although she didn't have a design at this point, she just kind of looked like this. I know I wanted to do something with the hat over the eyes, but that was all. And so with that, Rob took it as his duty to try and help Clay get up to party-going material by the end of the night, in which the only real success they have is getting him to say hi to a lady on the street. He also sees a party nearby with a bunch of people in suits, not realizing that they're actually having a funeral party, and so convinces Clay to get a suit and tie for the night. I ended up reusing that design for Rob's fantasy sequence in the final cartoon. It's pretty similar to the final from there in terms of structure, except here Clay is the one to split off after feeling embarrassed, in which Rob starts talking to the cool cat and big dog character. Clay then tries to talk to a girl similar to before in a scene I would end up reworking for the final cartoon, before getting nervous and running off into the host's bedroom, and we learn that they used to be friends at some point. She then comes in and asks about Rob, who's out making some new friends, which makes Clay sad to see that he could be moving on without him, before getting furious to then learn that they weren't even invited to the party and Rob just stole the girl's ticket. This leads to a big build-up where Clay yells at him and then runs out onto this big hill right here from the shot. And Rob comes up behind him and they both apologize to each other and connect more as friends. The end. I had decided from here that if I were going to make this an actual cartoon, then I wanted to fund it entirely by myself using whatever I had made from YouTube. I kind of recognized how fortunate of a position I was in, and didn't want to sit around waiting in case a point ever came in which that just wouldn't be possible anymore. And so with that, I storyboarded the entire thing, got Javi and Lillian to revise it, and reached out to a recent mutual I'd acquired, Rebecca. I saw on her profile that she had been working at Mercury on shows like Hilda and The Tangled Show, both of which I thought looked amazing, and so started asking her about rigged animation and the overall process of putting them together. Pretty early on, I decided that I wanted to focus on rigged animation over frame by frame, one, because it cuts down on costs monumentally, but also because I had always hated that stigma around rigged animation, that it inherently looks bad. Frame-by-frame animation to me is something that can look absolutely phenomenal, but when done poorly can really hinder the visuals of a project. And obviously working on a cartoon for the first time, working with freelance artists all around the world, I sorta just knew going in that rigged animation would be a lot easier. Retakes are more simple, you don't have to worry about cleanup or colorists, and if done well, I knew it could look fantastic. And so with that, and Rebecca's help, I reached out to Jordan Betty, who worked at Boulder Media in Ireland, to put together rigs of the main characters. I'd also garnered a couple animators at this point who wanted to help out, on top of reaching out to Getty K for backgrounds. I found her art online and fell in love with the style she had. I loved the idea of having this ultra-flat, thick outlined character over top more abstract, saturated, lineless backgrounds, and was absolutely ecstatic when she got back to me saying she'd be willing to work on the cartoon. She unfortunately couldn't stay for long, but she had done a bunch of concept art for the episode, including interiors for the house party and this establishing shot of the school that unfortunately wound up getting unused. Who knows though, maybe in a future episode. Kickstarter in the description. With that, it was time to start animating the first scene, which was gonna be of Rob's dad dropping he and Clay off at the house party. If you couldn't tell, I reused a lot of these ideas for the final cartoon. Although the dialogue here is entirely different. Actually, I'll just let the whole scene play out to give you an idea.
Thanks for dropping us off, Dad!
All right, have a nice time, Robbie. Now, try not to get too many girls.
Yeah, thank you, sir.
Hmm.
I don't think your dad likes me very much.
What are you talking about? He loves you. Besides, you'll be too busy hands deep in buddies to worry about what he thinks.
If you couldn't tell, while the overall tone is similar, the main difference between the two pilots are Rob as a character. His naivete in this version was really pushed up to the extreme. He was way more of a happy-go-lucky, everything-is-fine kind of character, and that never really broke throughout the cartoon until the end where Clay got mad at him. This is where things changed, though. We got exactly 2 shots into animating this episode. One was fully complete.
I really don't think you know what people go to these parties for. And I still think we look pretty dumb wearing these outfits.
But that exact same week, I told everyone to stop what they were doing, because I wanted to scrap everything and start over. Why? At this point, it was August of 2021, and I'd been working on the cartoon for around a year. This was by far the longest I'd ever spent on any project, and something that started happening from then was second-guessing everything. I think the fact that it was starting to be animated marked a point of no return in my mind. Everything would be locked in and whenever I wrote could not be changed. And again, this was a script I had written a year ago. I think I was 17, just turning 18. And now here I was close to turning 20 and I just couldn't look at the animatic the same way I once did. Not even because of anything that was inherently wrong with it. I had just never experienced that feeling before of looking at something for so long that it started becoming mush in my mind. Every scene, every piece of dialogue felt completely scattered, like nothing made sense. I started showing it to people around this time to get their thoughts on it, and most of what I would end up asking them was simply, does this make sense? Can you follow along? What's happening? Am I going crazy? And despite pretty much everyone saying that it was solid and nothing was really wrong with it, I just wouldn't believe any of them. I felt like everyone had been lying to me. I genuinely felt like I was going crazy. At that point, I decided I wanted to change some stuff. That's actually where that montage came into play. Originally, it was just a scene of Rob taking Clay into his room to look for the suit and tie before I decided a montage would work better. I think I also included a scene of them walking outside their school and seeing their journey home as they talk about the party. Changes that I do think were for the better, but it's a thing where once I had made that first change, once I had decided it was okay to rework something, the floodgates just opened and I started changing shit left and right. Dialogue, scene placement, everything. And it was only when I started rewriting and restoring storyboarding the entire ending, where I decided to stop and just quit. This may seem insane, by the way, like in retrospect, just fucking finish it is the mindset I should have had, but I really cannot explain how it felt at the time. Pretty sure I thought them having their big heartfelt bonding moment happen on the top of a hill was a bit cliche or too perfect of a scenario or something. And so my new ending got as far as me storyboarding Rob climbing over Clay's fence to talk with him in his shitty yard. But so much had changed by then that a part of me thought, well, hey, maybe a fresh start would be better. And let me clarify something. This was a dumb decision. I cannot stress enough how much I should have just taken a step back from the project for a month or two and came back with a fresh pair of eyes. Because a couple months ago, while compiling assets for a potential art book that I might do in the future, I came across the old animatic sitting on Google Drive, with me from a few years ago doing all the voices as a placeholder.
Wait a second, Jessica Jacobs is throwing this party? Yeah, do you know her? Yeah, but we don't really talk anymore. Oh. So what are you doing tonight? I don't know, watch TV? Oh, we did that last night. I don't invite you to come.
And I was surprised to see that I actually liked it a lot. I really liked it. Lillian and Javi made some really funny cartoony boards with a bunch of fun gags, and I found the through line to actually work pretty well in retrospect. I thought that if I could have just seen this the way I do now, then I probably would have finished it. But that's not what happened. Whoops. I actually never had a full animatic with the voice actors done for this version of the cartoon, only the dad dropping off scene which I had put the voices in. Again, I was so in my own head about everything that I couldn't even hear the voice actors reading the lines without covering my eyes, like I just wasted everyone's time. But because of this new outlook on it that I've gained over the past couple months, I've actually started to become pretty proud of it. So I'm gonna go and re-edit all the voice lines back in and finish the animatic I started 4 years ago. Like I said before, it's one of the Kickstarter awards. You can see the lost episode back when the show had a much more kid-friendly tone. I think the main thing that happened that made me want to start over was during the animatic process. I thought to myself, why the fuck did I make an episode about a house party? I never really remember anyone having house parties when I was growing up. At least not that I knew about. It was all about going clubbing, going to crappy underage discos where you'd stand around in a crowded community center trying to talk over a loud as hell DJ playing a bunch of crap, buying knockoff colas for £1. I also remember absolutely hating it when my friends would say they're going to one on the weekend. I always had better memories of what we did at home before and after the club, but going there was a nightmare. I'd just take my phone out every 5 minutes and wait for an appropriate time to leave. With that, I thought more about the future of catching up, and that if I ever were to make more episodes, then I would want it to pull from my experiences as a teenager. The awful shit I had to do that I hated, but thinking back, I'm glad I did. I wanted the overall theme of the series to focus on the fact that around that age you're kind of expected to be doing all this shit that me and my friends were just not interested in. But despite that lack of interest, we had to do it anyway because it was just sort of what you did living in a rural neighborhood where there wasn't many options for what to do on a Friday night. You know, when you aren't old enough to go to a pub or something. I no longer liked the idea of Rob being this super friendly, naive kid who acts like a fool but still gets his way in the end because it just didn't seem real to me. If someone acted like that when I was growing up, they'd be considered a fucking freak. I also liked the idea that if Clay just chilled out and stopped having such a negative outlook on things, then he'd probably get along just fine with other people. It was also around that time I realized the current voice for Rob, which fit his original character well, wasn't something I imagined would work as greatly given his more edgy personality now. Which is how I went back to my voice actor submission emails, and found Mackenzie, who initially was tied for the voice of Rob early on before I initially chose Darcy. I really loved Darcy's performance as Rob, it was really innocent and fun. But again, given the personality change, I felt going with something a little more raspy would fit better for the rewrite. I realized then that I wanted the theme of the show to be about experiences. The fact that both characters are put through uncomfortable situations, in Clay's case against his will, before turning around at the end and both of them realizing that they're glad they went through it, no matter what the outcome was. That they've come out the other end a little more self-aware, a little less naive on this transition from kids to adults. That's also why I like the idea so much of having the first half of the pilot focus on showing Clay and Rob together, and then the latter half seeing them split up, us getting to view how they are interacting with the outside world, before ultimately coming together at the end in a moment that grows them slightly closer as friends. That's also why I wanted to make sure they were both total opposites in how they would interact with people, Rob embracing new experiences and Clay rejecting it. However, in Rob's attempt to act mature in a superficial way, by acting like he knows everything and eventually deciding to have him swear, we see his worldview shattered as nothing he knew about any of this was real. Again, it was all superficial. That's why I wanted that scene later of Clay getting so nervous when talking to the girl that he just straight up calls his mom a bitch, like Rob does to the girls earlier. I wanted that to kind of reflect Clay in that moment trying to act more like Rob in a moment of panic, and only further finding out that that doesn't really work. Then Clay is the reverse, he doesn't want anything to do with any of this. He kind of likes the more isolated life he has and rejects the idea that just because he's older, he should be going out and chatting up girls and partying. But the more he eventually chills out and just goes with the flow, the more he finds himself fitting in and having a good time. Both characters struggle with the idea of growing up and in a way aren't mature enough to handle it, but they at least by the end of the cartoon are able to come together and recognize that they're there for each other in this new and frightening period of their lives. And that's why it's called Catching Up. Yeah. And that's all just a long-winded way of saying what I now wanted from the cartoon is not something I felt was reflected in the original pilot. For a long while, I was seriously considering just making 2 episodes and releasing them both at the same time. Again, stupid. But eventually I came to realize that if I wasn't happy working on the current pilot, and had an entirely different one ready to go that I liked way better, then I should just fucking make it. It's also why the tone changed. If I were to make more of this, then I wanted to pull from my own experience. And I knew I couldn't truly do that in the way I would want to, if it were for kids. I would sort of have to restrict myself. But at the same time, I didn't want to exclusively direct it towards adults either, because again, it's focused on teenagers and those experiences. And so then I came to realize, who fucking cares? I'm making it for YouTube, it's not like I have to answer to anyone about what I write. I'm kinda just making this for myself at this point, so if I want the mouse to say bitches, then he's gonna say bitches. If I just had to put a number on it in my head, the target demographic for the show is probably somewhere between the ages of 12 and 18. And I know that kids this age are saying way worse stuff than whatever I could write. And so then and there, the decision was made to not restrict myself into exclusively writing it as a kid's cartoon. Within reason, I wanted to make sure that if I were to add swears somewhere, it had to serve a purpose in some way. Like, to me, writing Rob calling Clay a jerk or something would just seem so weird because you would get beaten up for calling someone that where I grew up. I wouldn't say you're a jerk, I'd say you're an asshole, dickhead. And so I thought, if appropriate, who cares if I add a swear in here and there? You might just fundamentally disagree with that opinion, you write it as a kid's cartoon or an adult cartoon. It stars teenagers and their animals, therefore, kid's cartoon. And that's genuinely fine if you think that. I personally just disagree. Again, it's the internet, it's YouTube. The freedom's there, so why not take it? It's like getting upset about, rude removal to me. Another thing I felt around this time was relief that I barely talked about this cartoon online. I purposefully tried not to put a definitive release date on it, mostly why the announcement came like 2 days before. I was also happy that I made the decision early on to fund the entire thing myself. It's not like I had to come forward and apologize to everyone that the thing would take another year or two to make. It meant I had a lot of freedom for experimentation, and I think that definitely helped the cartoon out in the end. Again, with this slightly more adult tone, I realized that Rob's original personality wasn't working too well in this version. I'd initially wrote him to have the exact same carefree attitude as the original pilot, but thought it would open up a lot more opportunities for jokes if he had a slightly more incel type of vibe. He really wants everything he thinks he should have at that age, and doesn't realize how much of a loser he actually comes across when trying to get it. I think this also helped in making him slightly more hateable, like he's somewhat deserving of the crappy night he ends up having. He's asking for it because of his expectations, Things were still changing a lot though, mostly adding scenes. The cartoon started as a 13-minute animatic, but over the course of the production it grew to 19, which I was not expecting. That number was quite a shock to me. I definitely think I could have tightened things up more, make everything a little snappier, but at the same time, every scene that I added I think was for the best. Originally, it started with Clay walking home. What happened at school was implied to have been annoying, but I realized it was not a good enough introduction to either character. That whole scene of Rob talking to the big Kellen Goffwolf wasn't there, but I wanted a moment to show that Rob was still actively seeking out the Jacket Girls, and also a moment where we get to see his worldview start to break a little. Clay talking with the girl at the table and almost stepping on the worm was never there. Originally, he just went straight to the Cold Cat character. The gag originally was that he just put on a timer on his watch and walked in circles to wait for the night to be over before getting called over. And the overall interaction with the girls at the end was way quicker. This shot right here where Rob looks darn sad was originally supposed to lead into him getting mad and standing up for himself, and then Clay walks over and throws the jackets in. That was it. Again, all changes that I think were made for the better. I really can't imagine the cartoon without them. But I do understand the complaints that it was too slow and long. And as a result, that's partly the reason why going forward, I want to make every episode we get to make a solid 11 minutes. I think now I know how to achieve what I want within that time frame. On the production side, I also wanted to make sure I could reuse whatever I could from whatever was done before. And so I pulled a couple scenes from the original pilot and put them in this new one wherever it fit. The dad drop-off, the girl Clay meets, the girl he yells at, and I also got to reuse a bunch of background designs Getty had done. The school hallway, the girl's house from the party episode became Clay's house now. Although if I were to make more, I would probably redesign his house's interior as it's a bit empty. But it was around that time I also hired 3 more background artists. Josh, Kara, and Adrian. Adrian was a great help in figuring out the overall style of backgrounds I wanted to go for. The super abstract look with sharp edges and bright colors. The best thing about them was that they were so abstract. When storyboarding, I just did not think about backgrounds at all, so I ended up needing a ton to get the shots I wanted. But because of the art style being so simplistic, a lot of them could be made with rearranging assets. Take the club wall and remove the posters. There we go, it's like a new wall altogether. Grab the floor and shift the perspective a little. There we go, there's a lower angle. Really allowed the backgrounds to be made quickly and efficiently. The animation was definitely a learning curve though. Before we began, I was looking at Rob's rig and I just couldn't help but think, this just does not look like Rob, and I don't know why. Then I looked at the model sheet and realized he was drawn just differently enough for the entire design to feel off. His body was more of an oval, his arms just kind of came out of his neck. His eyes were 2 eggs leaning on each other. It was either going to be a case of me having to do redraws for every single shot to make him look closer to the model sheet, or just bite the bullet and do another pass on the rigs, which took around another month. I think there were some animators who still ended up using the older version of the rig and not switching to the newer one, which is why a couple shots in the final animation look a little different to others. Also probably why there are certain shots where Rob and Clay's line art differ. One was the old rig and one was the new rig. And so going forward, if making more episodes were on the table, then I want to do one final cleanup of the rigs just to make sure they're perfect. Best thing is though, every rig made for the pilot can be reused in future episodes. They're in the bank, the cast can only grow. Kickstarter in the I'm a picky asshole, so I still ended up doing redraws for most of the shots, but overall, everyone I worked with on the animation side did an amazing job. My favorite thing was when they'd push the rigs to be exactly like the boards. My mind jumps to the scene where Clay builds up the courage to say hi to the rabbit girl. You know, that was all Lillian's boards and Andrew's ability to push the rigs to recreate the expressions. Aaron Victor I was also super impressed by. He would also copy the boards to a T. A lot of his work, especially Rob and Clay walking to their bus seats and Clay talking to Rob's dad, were pretty much done frame by frame. He would sketch out the animation and then use the rigs. But no matter what, shoutouts to every one of these guys, except that prick right there. The compositing is probably what took the longest. I mean, just look at it. I think maybe an entire year and a half was spent on compositing, and took place while the final couple scenes were being animated. Matthew Bitts had reached out to me about doing assets for my podcast. I swear we'll get back to weekly uploads soon. This cartoon has occupied so much of my time the past couple months. But it was around that time I made a post looking for a compositor, to which he said, "Hey, I've never composited before, but I'll give it a go." Yeah, you heard that right. This was his first time ever compositing before, and I think it's safe to say he knocked it out of the park. I really fell in love with the idea of having these super flat characters on more abstract backgrounds, with this ultra-realistic lighting, kinda like Gumball. And given the theme of a nightclub, it really opened up the possibilities for going all in and having it look super busy and insane. Casey and Madeline came in to help with the last few scenes that needed compositing, and they also did a fantastic job. I was really impressed at how well Casey managed to replicate Matthew's lighting style for that final scene of them at the club. However, an issue that arose, which lasted about an entire year of troubleshooting, was me asking Matthew to send me the compositing files to render myself instead of him, mainly so we could save time as he can continue compositing while I render the shots. But Google Drive was just shit for this and would frequently fail to upload files. Sometimes I would get a PNG sequence with random frames just missing here and there. A couple shots like that actually ended up in the final cartoon. It just so happened that me extending the previous for one more frame was just unnoticeable enough for me to get away with it. But it's also why, and I didn't see anyone point this out yet, maybe some have, I didn't see it, but some shots have this shaky cam effect and others didn't. It's so unnoticeable that it's something I didn't even realize until the night before I had to upload. Whoops. Because Chrome would fail to upload files, I would basically have to re-put together a lot of the shots. Most of them wound up looking like this when I opened them. And I think in my attempts to re-cobble them together sometimes, that shaky cam effect would go missing. And it wasn't until I spent months re-rendering every single shot, some of them taking an upwards of 15 hours for just a few seconds of animation, that I finally noticed. I actually tried to reinsert them the night before uploading. I learned that in Premiere Pro you could just record your own handheld footage, nest it with the clip you wanted on, add a stabilizer, and then you could apply that shakiness to the other file too. But the ones I would attempt just came off way too shaky, it was distracting. And I thought if it took me months of looking at the cartoon to even notice it was missing, then I can live with uploading it the way it was. The music and sound design was something I didn't fully have done until about 3 or 4 months ago. But I did know I wanted some kind of contrast between the first half of the episode and then finally getting to the club. And so it was with the help of Veronica and hiring Jesse that we were able to figure out this cool classical cartoon jazz vibe for the first half. Setting things up as a simple, happy little cartoon of two buddies going to a club. Before they get in the bus, Rob drops his bitches line, and suddenly the happy jazz goes away and now there's crappy, intense Eurobeat playing until the end, done by my friend Dumpsville. That contrast between them at school and home, talking to his dad, and then suddenly things get way too intense once they go to the club was definitely something I wanted to convey through the sound. I'll leave it at that though. You can check out Jesse's video where he goes way more in depth with the score and what we wanted to achieve with it. There were so many issues that I was consistently like, I'll get to it. And suddenly it was now the final week of production and I had to sort this shit out. This shot right here
Well, what kind of person would I be to not at least return them?
was just not lining up right. I did not know what happened during production for it to get so out of sync. I called Mackenzie like 3 different times to redo it, and it literally got sorted less than a week before the cartoon came out. That whole ending animation with the eulogy for the worm was an idea I had like 2 days before release, and Veronica sat down for like 15 hours straight animating it in one go. It was literally finished at 6 AM when the cartoon went up at 2 PM the same day. The shot of Rob outside the club was uploaded without the crowd or a background or anything, and so I had to sit down and try to figure out how to take the crowd from the previous shot and reuse it, which I was so happy lined up correctly. Clay's animation also had this weird bug where you could see the bottom of his rig, so I had to go and reinsert the fixed version of the animation. The literal night before release, I realized my friend Jean drew the background characters in the school shot to only be visible from a certain angle, and the compositor inserted them slightly off, so I was watching it like, wait a second, this girl doesn't have any fucking feet. And so I quickly redrew them and put it over. Also in this shot right here where Rob walks away from the coat rack girl, his body kept cutting off. Again, I think it was a case where it was animated under the assumption that the background little card here would be up more, and I just couldn't figure out how to rework it without completely moving the whole lighting, and so I just did a couple PNGs of a black line and put it over. Same with this lunch scene. These guys' legs and feet were not there originally, but I thought it looked too weird without them. So I drew them over, which created a whole other issue as Rob walks in front of them, and so I had to manually go and mask out each frame. Again, all this was a couple hours before the cartoon came out. I did the same thing for the worm in this shot. Originally, they weren't there at all, but I thought it would be fun continuity if they were, so I had to mask right when Rob goes over her. I'm not sure how interesting this actually is to you guys, by the way. I feel like I've rambled enough, so I'll give a closing statement and answer a couple of questions I got. I was stressing about this cartoon for 4 years. Constant worries about what people would think of it, what people would think of me. And it wasn't until the day before release when I finally sat down and thought, I don't care. I have no idea what people will think of this cartoon. I've looked at it for so long that I can't make heads or tails of it. But no matter what the outcome of all this is, I am so happy with the final product. Even if it's not perfect, and it is not perfect. I sat down, said I was going to release a cartoon, and even if it took a while, I got there eventually. Again, I hit render on the final cut at 6 AM the day before release, and in those brief 4 hours where I was asleep, I had a dream where I woke up, said it's time to release the cartoon, and walked over to my computer. And then I started watching it and saw that things seemed different. The scenes were all garbled and things were happening that I never wrote. Random characters were jumping on screen that I never designed. I sat there baffled and thought, this is complete and utter nonsense. Then I grabbed the file and uploaded it to YouTube. I didn't care how it came out, I just pressed upload. I think that was my brain's way of telling me that I was done. That I could wake up, go online, and say, wait, I want another week or a month or a year to fix things up and make sure that it's perfect. But it wouldn't make me any happier than I already am with it. That no matter what I upload will forever be the final cartoon, and there is nothing I woulda, coulda, shoulda about it. It is done, release it. And so that's what I did, and like I said at the start of the video, I'm completely blown away by the response. At the time of writing this, it's actually about to hit 1 million views in only 6 days, and I cannot fathom the outcome that it got. I've gotten to meet some of the coolest people working on this, people I want to continue working with for years to come. But I'm so grateful to have been in the position I was in and that I had time and freedom to really explore what I wanted to do with this idea. Because I know that if given the chance to make more, I could really make something that I'm proud of. It's not for everyone, and that's fine. I know plenty of people didn't like it, and that's cool. But I cannot stress enough how happy and proud I already feel for finally having this out there. So, Kickstarter in the description. Any amount donated is greatly appreciated. Got some cool rewards there, but I probably mentioned that in the ad already. I don't know, I haven't made it yet. But right now, I have such a clear goal of where I want to take catching up from this point on, and hope I get to fulfill that vision in some way. Here's some quick questions that were asked on Twitter. I'll probably leave out anything that I've already answered through talking about it so far, and then I'll get out of here. I think I've talked long enough about this. Any trials regarding production and how I'd overcome it? Make spreadsheets. Know who was doing what, when they need to get it done, and where they're at regarding it. I didn't do that and suffered because of it. How would I critique my own pilot? This is hard to do because I actually haven't watched the cartoon since I hit render that day, but it was definitely too long. It could have been faster and needed a greater escalation by the end. A bunch of people asked about cameo voice actors like Kid Icarus, Zach, Chris, Tomar, Pello. I just asked. Tomar and Caddy recorded their lines like 2 years ago. I think I asked Zach once while we were walking around. I originally had Kellen voicing the Cool Cat, but I think I was talking with Veronica and we were like, you know who'd be perfect for this? Pello, and so again, we just asked. And I needed a voice for the DJ like a couple days before the cartoon came out, and so we just quickly asked Chris. That was it. How long did it take to write the script? Basically up until, I don't know, the end of production. There must have been like 30 versions of the script, each with minor differences, but I was adding and changing lines up until like a year ago when it was completely set in stone. Basically, before a scene was ready to start being animated, I would sit down and look at it and say to myself, is there anything I want to change here before I start animation? This person asks about the animation style and how I decided on it. And really, I wanted to do something similar to the Fairly Odd Parents, you know, no shit, where the focus was more so on the keyframes rather than the in-betweens. I wanted the animation to be super fast and snappy, focusing on quick expressions and movements. Finally, how did I manage working on catching up and videos at the same time? Very poorly. It took me until, again, the last year of production for me to really get a good flow going. Honestly, most of the work on the cartoon had been done in the past year and a half. And if I wasn't working on videos at the same time, I probably could have just done it in a year. Basically, whenever it was just me working on it, boarding, doing designs, writing, I would just get to it when I could. Then when I gave stuff to revisionists, animators, compositors, I would just work on videos until one of them got back to me. Then I'd do the revisions and send it back. If things took too long, I'd reach out and see what was up, but generally it was a constant triad. When I wasn't working on one, I was working on the other. It was all happening so fast that there wasn't really much time to get burnt out. And I'd do it all again! Throughout all of 2023, I think I had the mindset, fuck it. Just get it done, let it be over with. Please just release it and move on. But the closer it got to being done and the more I got to see it as a completed thing, by the time it finally was done, I couldn't help but think, God damn it, I want to make more. And so I hope I get to. Again, Kickstarter in the description. If we get funded, I plan on getting started right away. And if you're just here for Family Guy rants or something and are sick of me talking about this goddamn cartoon already, worry not, as I have a big 3-hour video coming out at the end of next week if all goes well. Until I have something ready to show, production updates will mostly just be going straight to Kickstarter and the Discord server. Thanks again for all the support, can't stress that enough. There's not much else to say.